Just, thanks. Okay. Well, welcome all to the first Portland Clean Energy Fund meeting that we have had in a while. It's going to be a pretty fast one, so we're going to, I think, get going. And I'm just going to start with going over some basic online meeting protocols, as we always do. So the committee meeting is open to the public. We do have quite a few members of the public here today. You do have access to the chat box, and we would like to ask now if you could put your name, if you have an organizational affiliation, and gender pronouns into that box now. Then we can go ahead and introduce you when we do our introductions. There is an opportunity for public comment, or we're running a couple minutes late, so it's going to be a little after 12:05. If you want to provide public comment, please also indicate that interest in the chat box, and so that we can make a list and get you in the queue. The raise hand function is reserved for committee members only. We have asked, especially when there are large numbers of people, that the video be kept to committee members and staff who are participating in the meeting. Members of the public will generally have your microphones muted unless you're providing except during the time that you're providing public comment. You should have all received a notice that this meeting is being recorded, so hopefully that is okay. And closed captioning is also available, and you can find that by going up to the little Zoom menu bar, either at the top or the bottom of your screen, and where there are 3 dots, the menu that if you hover over that, you'll get another menu, and you can click on the on the closed caption or show subtitles or view full transcript, depending on how you want to see things. So with that, I think that we will move into introductions, and we will start with committee members. I will call on committee members, and then we'll move on to staff. So let's go ahead and start with Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael Eden Hill, PCEF committee member, he, him pronouns.
Thanks, Michael. Shanice?
Hello, my name is Shanice Clark, she and her pronouns, committee member.
Thanks, Shanice. Robin?
Happy New Year, everybody. Robin Wang, PCEF committee member, he, him.
Thanks, Robin. Jeffrey?
Jeffrey Moreland, committee member, he, him.
Thanks, Jeffrey. Faith?
Everybody, Happy New Year. Faith Graham, she, her, committee member.
Thanks, Faith. And I think that, and I see Amanda, is in the joining process of the meeting, so just give her a minute and let her introduce herself.
Katie, Megan's here too.
Oh, I missed her. All right, Megan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Megan Horst, she, her, and committee member.
Hi, Megan.
Katie, I'm going to
Yeah.
jump in real quick. I'm just going to, if folks aren't, and I'm going to start doing this, if for folks that aren't committee members or staff, I'm going to ask you all to turn off your cameras just to help focus the screen. It's nothing against y'all. There may be a chance to turn that on, and it's a longer conversation, but to help focus that since we're missing some folks.
Thanks, Sam. And Amanda.
Thank you.
Are you fully logged on now?
Yes, I'm fully logged on now. Thank you.
Okay. So if you could just introduce yourself, and then we'll move on to the.
Yeah, hi everyone. Amanda Squimpagnazi, she, her pronouns, and committee member.
Thanks, Amanda. Ranfis?
Ranfis Genetino Viatoro, committee member.
Okay. And you can all check me. I think everyone, all committee members have introduced themselves. Is that correct? Looks correct. Okay, excellent. So now we'll move on to staff, and I'm going to start with Janet.
Good afternoon and Happy New Year. Janet Hammer, she, her pronouns, member of the PCEF startup team.
Thanks, Janet. And Angela?
Well, Privadelli, she, her pronouns, PCEF staff.
James?
Hi, everybody. Good to see everyone again. James Valdez, he, him pronouns, and PCEF startup team staff.
Wendy?
Oh, little trouble with my mute button there. Sorry. Wendy Kelfkin, she, her, PCEF staff.
Right, and I am Katie Lister, she, her pronouns, PCEF staff, and I'm gonna pass it to Sam, who will help us with introductions of members of the public as well as himself.
Okay. Hi, folks. My name is Sam Ross. I use he and him pronouns, and I'm with the PCEF startup team. And it's a new year. Welcome to the new year. And I've got to say, this is a little bit rough for me since it's been a minute since we've had a committee meeting. So we forgot to open up the chat box to everyone. I did just do so. So please, for guests that are on in this meeting that are joining us today, please introduce yourselves via the chat box, including any affiliations you want to include, and I'll start reading them off. So we've got with us Jenny Hall, she, her, from Energy Trust of Oregon. We've got Teresa Gotti from EcoTrust, she, her. We've got Quinn Scherf. Hopefully I said that right. Apologies if I didn't. And to everyone else if I mispronounced your name. She, her, Energy Trust of Oregon. Peter Kernan, he, him, Community Energy Project. David Radke, he, him, IBEW Local 48. Michael Human, he, him, Mac G, and Havra Shalom. Larry Williams, Bowley, ATD, he, him, his. Audrey Forrest, Friends of the Children, Portland, she, her. Nasker, MICC, Minority Impact Chamber of Commerce. Jen Latu, she, her, Portland General Electric. Katya Reina, Deepave, she, her. Dan Janosek, PGE, he, him, his. Anissa Pemberton, they, them, Coalition of Communities of Color. Michaela Spark Northwest, she, her. And Amanda Watson, she, her, Mayor Wheeler's office. So welcome and happy to have you all here.
And it doesn't look like anyone indicated indicated an interest in providing public comment. So I think that we will just move on to a little brief overview of the agenda. The real purpose of the meeting today is to talk about this recommendations for scoring the workforce section of grant applications with a single site construction budget of $500,000 or greater. We tried to figure out a way to make that shorter in the agenda, but it just was not possible. And then getting some committee member comments. So I'm gonna pass this back to Sam, who will kind of provide some background and the majority of the content and lead the discussion. Janet is also online for questions, and I'm just gonna mute myself and pass it to you, Sam. Just let me know when you want me to advance slides.
Great. And I just to give the extra moment, I know a couple of folks signed up, Angela Crowley-Cook, Oregon Solar Energy Industries Association, she, her, and Camus Rogers, President, Coalition of Black Men. So welcome, folks. And if we did miss anyone that wanted to provide public comment, either in the chat or on the phone, please just raise your hand and we can still do that. But otherwise, I will go ahead and jump into some brief program updates. Okay. So just wanted to start with, it's been a while and there's a range of updates. I'm going to keep this tight, so frankly, we can keep this focused on the content, but just some updates that are really important to note now. And Katie, next slide. I'll start with at the top will be we've had a whole host of new team additions, and I'm happy that we can finally announce some of them, and we will send out a media release probably tomorrow around some of these team additions. But you heard last week of Angela Previdelli joining the team as last committee meeting as the new grants management analyst. And we're incredibly excited to have Angela, and just going to bring a real powerhouse in terms of supporting our project managers. Today is also the first day for Laki All, and she's not with us here today in the committee meeting, but she's joining as our new communications manager. And Laki will be joining and brings a wealth of just communications experience as well as environmental justice experience, having most previously served as a communications strategist for Commissioner Joanne Hardesty. And then the last hire that I'll be able to announce now will be also our PCEF Green Infrastructure and Regenerative Ag Project Manager, and that person starting on board of the team on January 21st is David Granfield. And David is joining us from the Land Stewardship Division of Portland Parks and Recreation, where he managed community partnerships and friends groups in the Willamette River watershed. So this is just, the team is growing, and there's going to be a lot of conversations around how we structured effectively work amongst each other, but those are just really excited to announce some of those hires, and it's a big move for the program, but we still have a couple more hires to go, and we're still working through our workforce and contractor equity project manager recruitment, as well as our finance manager recruitment, and we'll have an admin specialist opening up probably next month. So just wanted to share that because we'll start getting bigger and you'll start seeing different faces, and we'll make sure that we come and probably figure out how to properly introduce everyone to the committee and the other way around too, which I know will just be important as we get familiar and get those folks familiar with working with you all. I just want to provide a little overview of just the application summary. I know a couple of committee members asked about this, and we just wanted to shed a little bit of light on this, recognizing we'll come back and provide more flavor to this. Just so that folks know, we did receive, when we talked about the 140 applications, the breakdown of those, and some of those applications did not, a handful of applications did not pass the eligibility review or the technical review, just a handful. But the breakdown of the remaining of those that did is that we have 57 planning grants, we have 45 small grants, and we had 33 large grants. Now, there's this second question of just what kind of projects were those? And this was a little bit harder to answer, and Katie did a great job in summarizing these here. But you'll see is there's more nuance to it, and we'll get into that probably on the other side of this review. But about a quarter of the project proposals were solely focused on workforce or contractor development. Another 13% were solely singularly focused on energy efficiency or renewable energy. 13% were on other or the innovation bucket. And then we had about 10% in the green infrastructure and regenerative ag, again, solely focused on those. But this is where the story really is that a large majority of the, or not majority of the projects, but a large number of the projects, 41% of the projects were funding ideas and proposals that touched multiple funding categories. And of those, as you look across those, a large majority of those, 70% of them touched the energy efficiency or renewable energy component. And so it was, so even though that energy efficiency, renewable energy is 13%, that's really not, that's not as accurate because a big chunk of those had, a large chunk, 70% of the remaining projects were energy efficiency, and it had either workforce development or regenerative ag. It was energy efficiency, renewable energy, and innovation. So as many other things, so those multiple categories. And so it's sort of these are the stories that we'll need to dig into and tease out as we get to the other side of these proposals, to tease out how do we want to structure next year's solicitation based on what we're seeing and the type of proposals that folks are submitting this year. Okay, I just want to pause there and see if there are any questions. I'm not saying I may be able to answer them, but just see if there are any questions immediately off of the summary of these numbers. Okay. Well, then I know that we don't have Maria here, so I want to just check in. Part of what I wanted to give the floor to for a little bit was for folks to talk from the reporting committee. The reporting committee has been meeting. I know that's Maria, Megan, and Renfis, and so I wanted to see there was going to be an ask, or I know there's a little space that folks from the reporting subcommittee wanted to connect and share out, and so I just wanted to check in and see. Megan and Renfis, if either of you wanted to do that, or if we want to just skip this since we don't have Maria here, because I think the conversation was. I think I had heard that Maria might have been the one to be giving the update.
Happy to take a first stab. Megan, feel free to cover what I potentially miss. Yeah, so we had a meeting last week, sort of preparing around, again, sort of the purpose, short-term goal of providing a report for City Council in February. And I think we've done a tremendous amount of work throughout the year, definitely on the staff level, as well as on the committee level, and the several different subcommittee works that we have done. And we had sort of proposed this idea of, getting reports back from each of the subcommittees that could be consolidated into a report to City Council by February 12th. sort of trying to cover key areas around one, what we did around grant making in our subcommittee work there, in developing the grant making framework, bylaws, the tremendous amount of work put into creating sort of our governing charter, our guiding principles, which again has helped shape and influence our guiding principles for each of the policies that we worked on. An onboarding process. Of course, folks will remember we were able to bring in Amanda onto the committee, and just community engagement as a whole. And so I think we want to sort of cover some few key theme areas. One, what has PCEF program completed to date? So what's been the process, the successes, lessons learned? Two, what's been the plan for development around program level metrics? So looking ahead, how should PCEF track and report its work, including both program and grantee metrics? And when will the subcommittee and committee approve program and grantee metrics? And then, just providing recommendations for funding. And yeah, sort of, and again, I think our goal here again is providing an update again on those key areas, those themes to City Council. What we want to propose as subcommittee is see if we can have folks from each of those subcommittees provide a specific report. Happy to call out specific folks, but again, those key areas again were grant making committee, bylaws, guiding principles, process, onboarding process, and community engagement. I'll pause there because I may have skipped some things. Megan, is there anything that I may have missed from our discussion on the subcommittee work on reporting?
I'm looking at June's email here as a reminder. And no, I think you've covered it all, Ramfis. I guess to our fellow committee members, just to let you know, we don't expect like a giant formal report or memo, but we do want to get your input on like some reactions to what you think the successes or achievements have been, and then the like lessons learned or what we're still learning. So we're anticipating that that you could like do that in 30 minutes, like do some kind of reflecting in a pretty informal way. So that's what we're hoping to collect and inform our report out process. Yeah, that's what we've got.
So what I would say is stay tuned. Once you all, those asks will come by way of staff. We'll collect those from the subcommittee, and then we will forward those to the relevant committee members and all committee members where those reflections touch on everyone's feedback, so that we can start getting that feedback and pull that into something that we can share with City Council as an interim report out. When we head to City Council, our first set of grant proposals or grant proposal recommendations. Janet, I see your hand up. I may have missed something.
Oh, just wanted to let folks know that as Megan mentioned, small, half an hour. And if writing doesn't work for you, staff will be available to just talk it through or something. So low burden, just getting that information, that'll be helpful to put in the council report.
Hey, Sam, would it be helpful if we made recommendations now? Who might be ideal? Maybe that might spur questions from folks.
Yep.
On the hook.
To the extent that it's going to be relatively on the sooner end, but yes, absolutely.
Michael, as you are currently the sole person on bylaws, we were hoping if you'd be interested in providing an update on the bylaws section. From the grant making committee, I think Megan and myself are both on that subcommittee, but Robin, Faith, we thought this might be a great opportunity to get your input, your analysis on the framework and development and outcomes on the grant making subcommittee. Amanda, since you were onboarded, I think you would have a great unique take around what the onboarding process has been like. So those are the three sections, and then of course, I think we as a subcommittee will be taking on the lead on community engagement, and we're happy to fill in any gaps. But again, we wanted to make sure that this was all hands on deck. Everyone had their fingerprints on developing this. And of course, this will be reviewed by the full committee before going to city council. So I'll pause there if there are some immediate feedback or questions on that recommendation.
Well, and Rampiece, I don't know if you said, Shanice, we were hoping you would look at the guiding principles. I don't know if I missed that. And Jeffrey, we wanted you to look at committee meetings as a general practice pre and post COVID. So I guess in person and then virtual. So that didn't come up. So you all have an assignment and maybe we've missed something. Kind of, we tried to think about like what would be a holistic reflection on our work. So if we've missed something from that list, please tell us.
And I will say we've taken notes here, so as we'll follow up with these notes around just some of these assignments, feel free to respond back, and we can relay that. We can work through that feedback and see if there are other areas that have been missed.
One thing that seems like it would be important to include, I don't know if it goes in this report or if it's just an adjacent report, and maybe you're already giving this to City Council, but it really feels important that we highlight where we are with staff, just where, you know, what the operations look like and how it's been built out over the last year to get to where we are, that being such an important component of this program. So I don't know if there's, if you want committee weigh in on that, or if that's staff responsibility to kind of draft something that just says where we are and how we got here. Sam, I don't know if that's your job, but that feels like an important piece.
Yeah. My understanding was, and I know I wasn't sitting on the subcommittee, my understanding was that there would be homework for staff equally, just as well. I think Faith, in alignment with what you're just saying, that there'd be homework for staff to reflect on elements of the work that we've done that has less intersected with the committee, but certainly related directly to the program's implementation. So yes, there will be that. And if you have suggestions on those things that you'd want to see in there, please let us know. But I will check back in because I have a sense that conversation has happened, or that those ideas have been fleshed out. Okay. Well, not to move this along, but I know there's a main show that I'd love to move this along just to keep track to make sure we have enough time for the next discussion. What I will just, a couple of things I'll just mention is that June is working on thinking about our community engagement for year two, both as we're continuing and as we hopefully get post-COVID, but there's several efforts that are being planned as we start thinking about that. And so June will be reaching out to each of the committee members to start talking through what she's working through and how she's building out the community engagement plan. So just stay tuned, as that's a conversation we will bring back, but because some of that community engagement requires moving now and building out the plan now, we will be reaching out to each of you all individually to talk through those. And then we will come back as a committee as a whole and discuss those right after we award we come to the first award recommendations as well. Okay, so if that works, then let's move on to the next slide and talk about our scoring modifications. So I just want to start with sort of the intention with this modification, and this comes about in the way that we designed the scoring criteria. As you all recall, there was a lot of deliberation around where and at what level and how do we accommodate a lot of the feedback we heard from community groups around their ability at a proposal stage to answer certain questions, particularly questions around workforce and contractor equity. And so the way that we had proposed addressing it for this year, and I really want to caveat that, it really is about this year, was that for projects over $500,000 of investment in a singular site, we acknowledge that at that level that it could be reasonable to expect that you would have a contractor on board and could therefore dig into some of more details around what is a contractor's record around their diverse subcontractor utilization, around their workforce, around the workforce that they hire. And so that would be the level at which we would dig in and ask more questions. And so for those particular projects, we would take what we called a race to the top approach. And that race to the top approach was going to be where folks submit what they were going to do in terms of their contracting for those particular projects. And we would award the projects that are the highest, the most points, and then the projects that are the lowest the lesser points, and we would do it on a quintiles. We would break them apart so that we essentially say, all right, you know, these set of projects bucketed here, these set bucketed here, and you'd get so forth. You'd get the relative points based on where you fell, and it'd be related to all others that submitted applications and you know, over 500,000 at a singular site, so that we're pushing folks to do better. That was the intention, and at the same end, we recognize that that would, you know, I think what I want to caveat is that we also had a limit for our large grants of $1 million. And so I think while we come to you here today is the fact that we only had 4 projects submit applications where they were investing at least $500,000 in hard and soft costs, PCEF dollars, into a singular site. All other projects were lower than that amount, or investing that much in multiple sites, so doing a residential retrofit project across many areas. And so for these projects over $500,000, our scoring approach didn't quite work. And can we move to the next slide? I'll speak to that. So essentially, we needed to have at least 5 applications to break them apart into quintiles, and we would want to have seen a reasonable spread of those of what they're reporting around their workforce, their diverse workforce their diverse workforce strategies or diverse workforce goals, apologies, or their diverse contractor goals. For instance, and you'll see in the next table where they actually clustered in the next slide. But you know, if everyone said they were going to hire, you know, 45% diverse subcontractors, then you don't really have an ability to bring a race to the top approach, since everyone said one exact thing. And so we have to. So what we're coming to you all is reckoning with what we did receive. We put together a memo where we had a proposed set of recommendations in order to account for that. And so what I just want to flag is this isn't to say this approach didn't work and wouldn't work, particularly if we were to have grant proposals. If we were to have allow large grants to go above $1 million, I think you would see other proposals come in. But it's just that we happen, given with a grant cap of $1 million, we happen to only receive 4 applications that that met this qualification. And so we just want to, we'd love to hear your reflections. We have a recommendation on the next page that Janet can walk through in more detail. And our recommendations were based on doing a crosswalk between city goals, as well as the C2P2, the construction. I'm going to need help on this one, and I should have the construction careers
project.
Yes, Pathways project. So that's a collaborative across multiple public jurisdictions that are working on workforce and contractor equity goals. And so they've got a framework out there. And so we were doing a crosswalk between city goals and the C2P2, the construction careers pathways project goals, to see what does it look like to be a reasonable scores to associate with these based on what folks are proposing, since we could not take an exact race to the top approach. And so just want to pause there and see sort of any questions around the original approach, and then what we received, and just anything I've shared so far before we get into the recommendation itself. Let's move to the next slide. And so with this, I'll turn it to Janet to just talk through these, and we'd love to spend some time and hear any thoughts and feedback you have in terms of the recommended approach. And so at the end of this, we will be, because we're working through scoring, and this is a critical piece of the scoring, we will be looking to you all to make a decision around how we approach scoring these 4 particular proposals. And so we'll talk to this recommendation, but know that we in order to move forward with the scoring and continue on forward, we will be looking for that decision at the end of this discussion. Okay. Janet.
All right. So as Sam mentioned, we have 4 proposals. That's 1, 2, 3, and 4 across the. I'm moving my cursor as though you could see me, but I'm realizing you can't. So 1, 2, 3, and 4 represent different applications, and there are 4 criteria, which is the down the side there on the left, that are items that were supposed to be scored with a race to the top approach. So what you're seeing is, so for the first one, for example, it's the percent of the grant funding that goes to diverse subcontractors. And in that 1, 2, 3, and 4, the percent that they declared is going to flow through to diverse subcontractors, defined the way we laid that out in our RFP. So as you can see, 3 of them, it's 33, 30, 30. They're fairly closely clustered. And then 1 has a much higher, on a race to the top approach, a higher percent that they're suggesting will flow through to diverse subcontractors, and 63%. So when we were trying to think, well, what's this other way that we can score things when we don't have 5, so we can't make quintiles, and when they cluster closely together, so it wouldn't be, you know, how would we move one into one quintile versus another when they're so closely clustered? So what we thought to do is look at, well, what are the benchmarks or goals that the city or C2P2 have put out there that they're saying this is what we think is the good practice minimum that we want to see. So that's what that next column is telling you, is if there's a city goal or a C2P2 goal or both, what it is. And so the idea was, if we use that, you know, as you recall on your scoring spreadsheets, we have full points, the middle or partial points, and then the 0. So if we set that midpoint number as meeting what is currently recommended practice from the city or C2P2, that would get you that midpoint score. And then substantially more or less if you didn't meet that. So for example, on the first one, actually, I don't want to start with the first one because there's a little confusion about where the city, there's the goal and the performance. So the other thing we were looking at is when we had the information. So in the memo you received, there's a link to the procurement report anyway, that talks about, you know, what was the goal and then what did they actually achieve? Because the other thing we wanted to think about is, if the goal is 14%, but you know, we're getting high above that, then we would want to go with that higher number, knowing that that is what the market can bear. That's what people can, where the performance can be. So on the very first one, there's a little confusion in the report as to whether achievement was 13.5 or 44. I don't want to get into the details. We're waiting to hear back from procurement about what that is. So for that one, you're just seeing 2 options for the recommended score, depending on what the achievement actually was out there in real world performance of subcontracting. Moving to the next one, it's a little easier. Shouldn't have put that one on the top, but I just went in order of how they appear in the application. So for apprentice utilization, the percent of hours on the project, the city goal is 20%. The last year's achievement was 20%. So if we use that as kind of like, that's your midpoint, if you did that, you get that partial points, then the scoring would be 1 applicant defined 40, so they'd get that highest score. 1 said 0, so they'd get a 0. And then the midpoint 2 and 2. So the same for the second, the third and fourth that you're seeing there, percent apprentice hours that are going to priority populations. So it lists, the city doesn't have a goal for that. So for that one, we drew from the C2P2 framework, which the city is a signatory. And their goal is 25% to POC, and the language they use is women or women identified, and the goal 14%. And so we use that as kind of a benchmark. And then for the fourth one, the percent of our journey or non-apprentice hours that are going to priority populations. City goal is 18% POC. Their terminology is people of color, and 9% female. And the C2P2 goal, 25% people of color and 14% women and women identified. So I'll kind of stop there and take questions, but we've got 4 applications, 4 criteria, looked to city or regional benchmarks and performance to inform what might be a different way to score, and used that to come up with full, partial, and 0-point recommendations.
And I will just add, there were additional criteria in this section. These are just the ones that were focused on the race to the top approach.
Yep.
and that we couldn't score for this reason. But there are additional both panel scored criteria as well as other staff scored criteria that didn't have that were not complicated.
Yeah, these are just focused on the ones that we have a scoring method that we can't really use. Robin.
Yeah, I have a clarification question. In the original method where we have the quintiles, was the idea that each applicant would be in one of the 5 quintiles, and then if you're in the lowest quintile, you get 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4 points? Is that how the original plan was?
Yeah, the thinking with Race to the Top was that a couple pieces. One, we just really wanted to be encouraging people to do their best, and let's see what the community would bring forward. Also, one of the things that was challenging for us to set what a number or a threshold should be was that it was very much would be pulled out of the thin air, because we don't know what actually the pool of availability is. And so it didn't seem appropriate for us to say, we want to see, 15% gets you X score if we don't know that 15% is even a thing that could be achieved. So there were a few, that was kind of the, so Race to the Top was kind of encouraging people to step up, do more, do better, and be familiar with what they think is really realistic, and then just reward those that felt that they could make a strong commitment to higher utilization rates, and then they would score higher than those that could not.
Yeah, that's a really important point that Janet just made. We didn't take this kind of approach originally because we didn't have the resolution. And so this is really, we're backing into this because we can't take that quintile, or we can't take the Race to the Top approach because we just don't have enough spread nor enough applications at this scale. So we're sort of taking our best bet in using these goals as a way to assign scores.
Ron Feast's hand.
I have a question and then a concern and then just appreciation on this. I'll say on the performance, is just kind of clarifying question on that. Is that meant to be like submitted response, or is that supposed to be actual performance or history of performance, I guess?
Yeah, if you click on in the memo, or if you want me to screen share, I can, but procurement issued their report, performance report. And in that, they'll say, here's what our goals were, and here's what we actually did. This is what % of our contracts went to diverse subcontractors, or this is what, so it's what they actually achieved on projects for the last year that they're reporting on.
Oh, sorry. That's sorry. I think I now better understand city's performance, not contractor performance. That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean the contractor's performance of utilizing diverse contractors, or so what was achieved on those city-sponsored or city-funded projects? What was achieved on those projects? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
Then I have a concern on the apprenticeship utilization. So, I mean, if someone were to say they do 100% apprenticeship, I don't think that would definitely violate some apprenticeship journey level ratios where the unintended consequences, you have apprentices working on a project and they're not technically actually gaining apprenticeship hours. And then it really triggers that they're supposed to be paid the journey level rate. So I think you might have an unintended consequence in structuring it this way. That might be an issue moving forward, might not be an issue with the submitted responses, but.
It's a great question, Ron Fee. So we do know that there's like up to the, BOLI limits, apologies for not using the correct terms there, but that there is that apprentice utilization rates that are set. And we wouldn't want people to go above that. And that's written in. There's one here that was high, and we did, Katie, can you remind me, or Wendy, who there was a follow-up to confirm that what number was the correct. So you're absolutely right. We wouldn't want to score high for someone going over. And there was a check or confirmation that where the number was high, that was indeed what they intended. Katie, can you remind me, or Wendy?
It was me. I connected with them, and the number they submitted falls within the requirements. Doesn't exceed any of the caps that Boley has for the journey apprentice ratios. And also, I wasn't sure if you noticed Faith's virtual hand is up now as well.
So let's have Ron Feast finish and then move to Faith.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think I appreciate, including C2P2's, diverse apprenticeship hour goals. I think that's something that I think the city currently doesn't have, but they do have apprenticeship utilization goals. So I think it's a great addition, as likewise with the journey level. But I think it's worth pointing out that you might have I think it's I think that's a great positive. I think my concern really just is on how the apprenticeship utilization might be structured, and it's just different depending on what trade is involved. I think the numbers might look different, but I think it looks positive.
I saw Michael lean in, and as somebody who's much more competent to talk about this than I am, I'd rather Michael go first. if you have something, Michael.
I don't think I have anything currently. It's this approach for having oh man, what's the word I'm looking for? 4 grant applications. Thank you. 4 grant applications that are above 500,000. I feel like this seems like a pretty good way to do it.
Thanks. I'll just add appreciation too. I think that this seems pretty sound to me. And so thanks for going through that evaluation process. I just wanted to note one thing, and it seems to be related to what Ramfis offered as a concern too. I found myself wanting to compare the weight of these 4 and not thinking that the weight that should be the same, but I recognize that's a totally different evaluation process than the one we're being asked to do right now. So I had to keep reminding myself that these were not weighted equally, these 4 things. So if anyone else was having that problem in your head, that I just wanted to say it out loud in case somebody else was also having that.
I think, Faith, as we were going through, I thought about that too. I said, should we? And I was like, we should have had a slide if we were going to explain that. So yes, these, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 are the way that we ask our panel members and everyone else to score them. But behind that, there was a lot of work prior with you all to tease out what was the appropriate weight to give to each of those. So not each of those aren't a 4 in one of those categories isn't necessarily the same as a 4 in another. And those weights have so, and I can share that. Michael.
Yeah, I was also going to add that when we, in a year or two, I would like to, as a result of this, I'd like to see the numbers of hours of work on the projects performed by diverse subs and by diverse journey and apprentice hours, but the number of hours actually worked. Wondering if diverse subs have little tiny contracts built into the larger contract in the end. So that's just for a year from now.
Our reporting will be capturing that and then helping us to inform how applications should be assessed in the future. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay.
Robin's hand.
Yeah, I'm going to assume that as you guys, the staff was kind of contemplating how to resolve this problem, that you were considering, other options for scoring these criteria. Can you kind of real quick talk about maybe not some of those options, but talk about maybe some disadvantages of this approach versus some of the other options that you were considering? And I don't need to have here a breakdown of the other options that you were thinking about. I'm just kind of curious if there's any problems that you've identified with this approach?
I think I'll go first, and Sam and Katie can weigh in. And by all means, if you've got ideas for something else, we're all ears. That's happy to hear them. I mean, it just felt that you know, we weren't going to change the criteria themselves. We have 4 things that we asked people about. So really the sideboards were how might we score them? And it felt like the issues that we had that were identified were, well, we don't have the boundaries around, you know, as you can see, like, you know, if 30, 30, 35, it didn't feel fair to give people different score, like try to make somebody get a worse score if it wasn't a bad score. Sort of like when people have grading on a curve, and like if you have amazing students and they all do good work, why would you give some a F and a D and a C just because you have to make sure there's a spread? So once we came across quintiles having some issues, but also feeling like the review panelists are currently working with a framework that has a way of identifying what's full, what's partial, and what's no points, that would be a good framework to follow. So then it became about, well, how would we define what would be a reasonable midpoint, and what would that look like? So there weren't, to be honest, in my mind, there weren't a lot of other things that were racing to the top of other ways to approach it. Sam, Katie, do you have?
Yeah, I think maybe the only flavor I would add to that is just you know, these projects compete, you know, these 500,000 and above at a singular site compete with projects that are doing over $500,000, you know, across multiple sites, or they compete with small grants, or they compete with the projects that are below 500,000. So because they're still, you know, the scoring is still the basis for how they're going to be relative, at least it's going to factor into the evaluation and how they compare across other projects. It was important that we ground it with, that we try to ground it with some, we try to ground it to some extent with some other goals. And so there is a discomfort there, certainly, in that we know those aren't the goals we use in the beginning, because we know those aren't really the most relevant goals, in the sense of those aren't the most, that there's a little more nuance to the sectors that are working on these projects. And yet at the same time, they were the closest thing we could sort of grab onto and use as a comparative basis. And because as we looked at the numbers, there is enough spread. And there's, you know, if you look at the high numbers, 63, 40, 50, you know, 35, and that at least overlapped with goals that we saw within the city and performance we saw within the city, we said, okay, they seem, it's sort of our best bet, is if that makes any sense. So part of it is, maybe I would just say that we might not have just taken a different statistical approach where we said, okay, what is the average? What's the standard deviation? That's one standard deviation up, that's high, that's low. We might not have taken that because, you know, these projects are competing with others, so we wanted to ground them with some other, we wanted to ground them with other numbers, and if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I just have a quick follow-up. Sam, you just mentioned something. If you take a look at the percent to diverse subs, and then if 14%, you have 3, 3, 3, 4 as the potential scoring. Does that put these applications at a potential advantage versus all the other applications? Because in the old system, you know, one of those applicants would be getting a 0, another one would be 1, 2, 3, 4, whereas in this case here, 3 of them are getting relatively high points.
It's a good question. I don't know whether it's hard to say whether it puts them at a particular advantage, just because we don't know how the others are scoring in there, you know, across. There's elements of workforce contractor equity that they're going to be scored on as well. They're just not these same elements. And so it is a hard question to answer, but at the same end, it was the fact that, you know, a 33% or a 30%, sure, you know, we were like, is that really a 0, right? And that was the discussion, and to say, okay, really, if you're even just you're taking a ballpark look at these other goals, that it isn't depending on, that first one is a question mark, right? Because there's an if it's whether it's 14% or 44%, but in terms of the goals, but the 30% or 33% isn't necessarily bad. So,
and I think to tag on that, oh, sorry.
Yeah. No,
Well,
go ahead, Janet.
I think that I'm just thinking on my feed here, but as Sam noted, these aren't items that others get scored on. So there's that to take out. And we have a lot of other places where people are applying, and it's fine if everybody gets a 4 or all the same number. So I don't, we don't have an approach in other metrics where we're trying to get those numbers apart. And so I think it doesn't skew things in that regard here, is my initial impression. Does that make sense? Like if we have, like if you look at represent how the project staff and board are representative of the population you serve, the higher your number, the better your score. And this is and there's not a forcing folks to get a low score so that some people get a low score. And so I think this is happening here.
I think my point, I get that. And I think my point is, there's an unknown, 14% and 44%, and that would change the allocation. And if you go with 14%, then, these 4 applications get a nudge up versus some of the other applications that are not in this group of 4. So I just want to make sure that's fair.
Yeah, Robin, I think I understood your question maybe differently. And so if I could just offer a thought, and then I also saw that Ranfis's hand was up. I do think that in the workforce section for applications that do not have a single site construction budget of $500,000 or greater, the criteria, is different depending on the different types of grants and things like that. But the criteria to get partial points is generally like you're doing a good job, like you're meeting sort of the standard, what you would expect the goals to be, or what you would expect an organization to know about DEI training, or you're doing like kind of the checklist that everybody's going to be doing on outreach to certain culturally specific organizations and workforce development folks. And so that feels consistent with this methodology, which is kind of like, if you are hitting these goals, which are kind of the standard goals for what the city has said, then you get the partial points. If you're exceeding that, then you get greater than that. So I don't know if that speaks to what you were asking, but that was kind of what I heard in there. Like if we're talking about projects that are not one of these 4, it does feel like a consistent philosophy in the assignment of partial versus full versus no points.
Yeah, I'm not good at doing live math. So I don't know how to answer that. I just want to make sure that my concern is that with this new scheme, I want to make sure that, other applications that are not part of this 4 are still fairly evaluated and scored. That's my concern.
Interrupt real quick.
Sure.
I just have to say I have to go to a 1 o'clock meeting. So do we still have quorum if I leave?
I think we do.
Yes, we do.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I've got a 1 o'clock as well, so that will impact.
So Ramses, let's hear Ramses. Yes, let's hear Ramses.
Quickly,
Let's see if we can get to a decision.
Yeah, I don't think I'll resolve this. I think this is a good lesson for us moving forward. That I think, to avoid this dynamic, that we set allocations for each different category, so we're not trying to do an apples and orange comparison or try to figure out what fairness is between different projects. Because I think it's already creating. I think even for us, as we're trying to, what's fair at this point seems like, again, it seems like what's fair between an apple and orange and how we score and grade apple and orange. It just doesn't, that even doesn't seem fair. But I guess clarifying question here for me on this, and I don't think this will address this. So, city goal is 20%. Someone submits, says they're going to do 19% or 15%. What's the score there? Is it a 0, or is it like, a 1 or 2?
The 1.
A 1.
Depending how low it is, right? If it was 3 or 5 versus closer to the 20. So you, as reviewers, have those, you have a spread 0, 1, 2, 3, 4.
So any goal, any scoring below that goal will be subjective.
We didn't get it. That's the only thing I will say, Ramsey, is that we did only to see if we can get to the decision. That this what you all see is this is exactly the scores for the 4 projects. We didn't put labels on them, but this is exactly what you've seen. So
okay, got it. Sorry, I thought these were
yeah. There's no, these aren't hypotheticals. These are the scores these are the numbers for the 4 projects. So you'd be making scoring based on this recommendation. You'd be scoring these 4 projects according to what we've laid out.
Got it.
So it's 1 o'clock. Is there a proposal to make a decision? And if Michael and Shanice have to go, then let's. But and we can't get there. Then
Alternative scoring criteria for these 4 criteria and these 4 projects, as laid out in this table that's on the screen.
Okay, you know the format.
Can we get we would need to get a second. Thank you, Faith, for that proposal.
I second.
Oh, I heard Jeffrey. Okay. And
Yeah.
then I'm just going to go around and I will start with Michael and Shanice since they have to hop off and ask Michael, do you agree, stand aside, or no? Oh, you're muted.
I agree.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your week. Shanice?
I do agree. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Shanice. I'll talk to you later. Robin?
I agree.
And Megan?
I agree.
Amanda?
I agree.
Ramsey?
Yes.
Okay, and Faith put forth the proposal and Jeffrey seconded it, so they agree as well. So that is adopted. Thank you all for doing this with us really quick and helping us keep the process moving. Really appreciate that. And Ramsey, I do see that your hand is up. I don't know if it's up again or still up. Okay, I'm gonna lower it for you. Sam, you wanna close this out?
I apologize. I think we will give ourselves around an hour and a half next time. We were hoping that next time we have one of these sorts of meetings, I think we were hoping we could get in there on the lunch meeting and get this done. But it's clear we needed more time. Ramsey, I'll follow back up with you because and maybe just to be later this week, but it'd be great to talk that through. But just to confirm that, yeah, that was, you'll see those 4 proposals as we continue to move forward, and we'll get to dig in those again. Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, everyone.
Right.
Hopefully you all happy New Year's. Enjoy the rest of your days and the rest of your week.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Have a great day.